Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal podcast. I'm your host, Scott Brady, and for today's episode, I spend time with Toby Savage. Toby is a longtime friend and someone that I've long admired as a traveler. He's also an expert on Land Rovers of all vintages and also has spent quite a bit of time working on the long-range desert expeditionary group content and history that goes all the way back to World War II. So enjoy my conversation with Toby. We talk a lot about historical places. We talk a lot about travel, and we talk a bit about Land Rovers. And a special thanks to Rocky Talkies for their support of this week's podcast. Rocky Talkies are backcountry radios designed by a small team in Denver. The radios are extremely rugged, easy to use, and compact, weighing in at just under 8 ounces. They have a range of 1 to 5 miles in the mountains and up to 25 miles line of sight. The batteries will last from 3 to 5 days, and you can recharge them easily via USB-C right in the vehicle. Our team uses Rocky Talkies, and we also used them recently at the Overland Expo. The next Overland Expo, stop into our booth and say hello and check out the radios for yourself. And as a listener of the Overland Journal podcast, you can get 10% off a pair by going to rockytalkie.com/Overland Journal. Thanks again, Rocky Talkie. Thank you all for watching. I'm here today with Toby Savage. It is so great to have you on the podcast. What a joy.
Well, I'm flattered, Scott. I really am flattered. Thank you very much for coming over, especially from the States, just to interview me.
Yes, and we just had a nice little drive in the Grenadier. We drove about 10 miles over to get some food at a pub. Yeah. Because all the pubs in this little village were closed.
Yeah. I had a pint of London Pride, which is a very good bitter. And you had the Guinness.
I did have a Guinness. I do like a dark beer. If I'm going to have a beer at all, it'll be a dark one.
Yeah.
And we're actually recording the podcast right now in an old horse stable, so that they've turned into an Airbnb, and it seems to be working out just fine.
It's very comfortable.
Yeah, it's nice. I think it'll be a good home base for me over the next couple of days. So there's so much to talk about your career as a journalist, your career as a professional photographer, your exploits as an adventurer around the world. But I think it would be interesting to know, where did it all start? Where did you grow up?
Well, it has always been there, and it doesn't come from my mum and dad, who were pretty stay-at-home, really. My grandfather on my mother's side, he did a lot. He was in the First World War. Sadly, was in Gallipoli, Passchendaele, and the Somme, and survived. So he'd seen some action. He travelled a lot. So they moved out to Singapore when he was in his 20s, and then moved back to Britain. So there was a bit of travel there. But I really didn't know about that when I was growing up. It was more camping trips with my friends from school, which I always enjoyed. And I remember making lists of how many tea bags to take and slices of bread. And I was obsessive with it, and I probably still am. That organising of events means as much to me as the actual event itself, doing the planning. Because it's very important.
There's a lot of joy in it.
And if you plan things properly, you have less mistakes, hopefully. But then we had a teacher, Mr. Kirby, Jeff Kirby, when I was probably 13, who had what he called an old Land Rover, but in 1967 it can't possibly have been that old. He used to take groups of us camping at weekends.
Yeah.
There was no paperwork. It was just ask your mum and dad if it's okay. And it was. Yeah. So, that can't be done anymore in our teaching environment. It's too difficult. But then it was great. And that really did give me an appreciation of getting out there in the countryside and camping, which lasts to this day. Yeah. I'm actually camping in France this weekend under canvas. I can't believe it. That sort of formulated the outdoor part of my life, which continued.
What would you say was your first big Land Rover adventure?
I'm this year celebrating 50 years of Land Rovers. Not because they're Land Rovers. I like them and they're pretty good, but they were the key to doing the things I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. They had four-wheel drive, they were simple to mend, and they were cheap. And that sort of applies today, really. They are a means to an end, as are other things. But for me, it just happened to be a Land Rover. So I bought this thing in 73 for 120 quid. It was a 1954 86-inch series one. And we lived, I was at art college, we lived in a 22-foot caravan just below Figsbury Ring and Iron Age Hillfort, behind the lorry yard for £2 a week. It was hippie stuff. And I had long hair and wore snakeskin trousers.
As one does.
As one does. Yeah, so we thought, well, we'd take this on holiday. So we took it to Wales on holiday. And the thing's enormous.
Yeah.
And of course we got it stuck on the beach and we got into trouble from the beach management, and then we got it stuck trying to get into a farm to camp the night. But all those experiences, you realise that when you are stuck, you will get unstuck. And that is an important thing to remember. We didn't have a winch or anything. We just had some planks of wood and some rope, but we did get unstuck. And I think that sort of must have sunk in, because every time I have got stuck, and there's been many, I see it as an opportunity to get unstuck. And I think we're all a bit like that.
Well, and it makes for a great memory.
Well, yeah, it's another couple of paragraphs in
right.
a feature, how we got unstuck.
In your story, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the first time that you wrote about Land Rover. You've been featured in Overland Journal many times, and you've been featured in publications around the world. What was your first feature article?
There was a bit of luck involved. I'd been to a Beaujolais Nouveau tasting in Leicester in 1992. And when I came out, I bumped into an archaeologist who I knew. This was 9 in the morning and I had 4 glasses of red wine. So it wasn't the best time to have a business meeting, but he said, "Oh, you're a photographer, aren't you? Do you fancy doing some archaeological photography?" I said, yeah, it'd be great. I thought no more of it. And then he contacted me and said, "If you're on for it, we've got this dig going on and we'd like you to come take some pictures." And I just assumed it'd be some muddy field. But it was just outside Rome in the hills. It was just a beautiful spot. So I thought, well, we're onto something here. That has the gravitas of a decent story for a Land Rover magazine. And also I can do some travel photography, which I used to do and sell through a library in London. I can do that. And I had a client who did tourism, Page and Moore holidays in Leicester. They were quite well established. So I thought if I could pull in 3 little bits of income and blag a car, it would work.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I would have done it anyway. So I contacted Land Rover, who, this is the days when they're owned by British Aerospace, I think, and Colin Walkie and Josephina Zacharoli Walker with the PR department, press office. Well, I put this plan together. I said, this is what I'm going to do. And they said, yeah, blimey. They said, yes. So we'll drop it off at your house. I could not believe it. Anyway, the brand new Range Rover Classic now, TDI, was dropped off at my house.
What a beautiful car.
Well, it was perfect. It did about 30 to the gallon. I wasn't in a hurry. It was comfortable. It was brand new.
Yeah, sure.
So I set off. I went up into Austria and Germany and then dropped down into Italy. And because there's no mobile phones or satellite navigation then, it was a map, a pretty vague indication of where the archaeologists would be. But I did find them in the end and spent 3 or 4 days with them. And I did some video and I did some still pictures of what they were doing. And I did some nice pictures of the Range Rover, which then went on to make the front cover of Land Rover Owner, which was like a big deal. And I had 5 pages inside as well. So I thought, I'm onto something here. This is good. And I paid for it. So, with a bit of pay from here and a bit of pay from there, the trip cost me nothing. I thought, I like this. So I've based the rest of my life on that, really, travelling and doing things for other people. And having a great time.
When we were talking earlier at the pub, you talked about a series of yeses moving you in the direction that you wanted to go. And that's one of the greatest challenges in life is knowing what to say no to and what to say yes to.
Yeah, I tend to say yes to most things.
Well, it's worked out well for you.
It has, but you sort of weigh it up, don't you? And you think, well, yeah, that sounds fun. And I've never been materialistic, so as long as I've got enough money to live, that'll do. So if I've left with £10 and that's all there is, I'd spend it on diesel and eat something. That urge to travel, and it gets more so as I get older as well. You think, I've got £100 here, I could do that, and I do it.
Well, and recently you did, so let's talk about the trip you just got back from. So you left the UK on your 650 GS, and where did you go?
I'd had it in mind. So through the winter, I've been sitting down on Google Maps and Street View thinking, I could go there, and I could go there, and I can go there. And I didn't think I'd do it. I thought, I'll have the plan in place. And then if there's a suitable period of time and I've got money else on, I'll do it. I bought the motorbike the year before with a view to doing a trip on it. So I don't ride a motorbike just for A to B. It's for a trip. I do have a little Honda 125 for whizzing around on, but this was proper. And I've got all the luggage and all the gear and no idea, I have to say, because I've only been riding for, I suppose it's 20 years now, but I came into motorcycling late. So the plan was in place, and then various circumstances conspired to think, well, look, I could do this next week. I booked nothing. The weekend came, I thought, yeah, Monday I'll go. So it was that short a time, because I had 6 weeks with nothing much on. So I booked a ferry from Portsmouth to Santander in northern Spain. So it was one hop down to Portsmouth, which is relatively straightforward, in the cold and the rain. So I arrived there with 3 bikers waiting to get on. And the funny thing about bikers, they assume we want to talk about the bike and not about the trip.
Yeah, sure.
So, oh yeah, what's that bike? I think, I don't know, it's a bike. I really don't want to know lots about the workings of them, as long as it goes. Anyway, I played the game, and then we got on the ferry. The next day, stepped off in Santander in Spain, where it was still a bit iffy, the weather. And I went along the north coast into France, and then up into France for a bit, and then dropped down. And I just had no timetable. And what I liked about being on a motorcycle is you can't carry too much clobber. You can carry your clothes and something to keep warm and dry, and that's it.
And that's about it, yeah.
Yeah,
maybe a few snacks.
Yeah, a few snacks, yeah, and some water to drink. But I was always intended to stay in hotels. There were a couple of times when I had difficulty finding one. But I got into a rhythm of sitting in bed with my laptop in the morning and going on booking.com and thinking I'll stay there, then plotting a route that avoided motorways and big roads. And it was beautiful. The roads I travelled on were just gorgeous, empty of traffic, good tarmac. I'd probably do 100 to 150 miles a day, which is doable.
Yeah, very modest. Yeah.
Very modest. I didn't want to be a hero. I also had a good time. So yeah. I went up through France and down through Italy, where I stayed with a friend for a couple of nights in northern Italy, and then down to Bari on the southeast coast, and then got a ferry overnight to Albania, where I'd never been, and I heard lots of good things about it, and it lived up to expectations. So
now, how does Albania compare, like with Croatia, for example? Because they share the same coastline,
yeah,
but they're, of course, Albania is much further south.
It's further south and it's poorer, but it will catch up. So
yeah.
it came across to me as it was definitely poorer and things were cheaper. The Albanians were very friendly, and the mountains were just gorgeous. And again, nobody there. So the routes I was picking were exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be riding up a gentle slope through woodland, getting to the top, seeing a huge view, taking a deep breath and thinking how lucky I am to stand here and do this. And
yeah, we are so lucky.
Yeah. People, they'll sit in the pub saying, I think I might go and do this, and they don't do it,
And time flies by if you don't do it.
Well, yeah, and you get to, you think, well, one day I'm going to do this trip. Oh, get out there and do it, Anyway, Albania was very nice. I ended up in a sort of seaside resort at the end, which was quite very comfortable, really, in a nice hotel, which was only 50 quid a night. And for what it was good. And then it chucked it down in rain, so I thought, well, I'll stay another night. So I did.
Fantastic. And then you ultimately made it to an island, and then you had to leave the bike behind.
I went down through Greece and crossed over on the ferry to Kos, because my aim was to go to Turkey to see some friends there. Kos is a beautiful island. I rode around that and stayed in the town of Kos, which is where the port is. And there was a listing of a ferry daily, but they said, oh no, it's every other day now, because it's off-season. So I was in this hotel near the port. I went back and said, okay, I have a ticket for me and the bike. And they said, what bike? Bicycle. I said, no, motorbike. Oh, no, you can't. There's no cars or motorbikes going over until the summer. The boat's being serviced.
Oh, wow.
Oh, shit. Right, so I said to the hotel, do you mind if I leave my bike right outside your office window for a couple of days? And he looked at me as if to say, well, of course we don't mind. They're so friendly. Yeah. So I had to take a lot of stuff off, put it in the panniers, lock them, cover it with a cover. It looked a bit of a mess. But he said, no, it's all right, leave it there. So I did, and I was a foot soldier over to Turkey. I thought, well, I'll come back in 2 days. But then the wind got up and the ferry was cancelled. So I was stuck there for a week. There are worse places to be stuck.
Of course.
But I had to phone the hotel and said, look, I'm really sorry, but can I leave the bike there for another few days? He said, of course you can. I thought, oh, thank you. I got back and everything was fine. And then I caught the ferry back to Greece. I had been intending to ride up through Turkey, past the area of Gallipoli and the Bosphorus and do that, but that didn't happen. So I went up the east coast of Greece and then into Macedonia, which was quite a culture shock. Such a poor country. It was like a quarter of the prosperity of the other places, which was fine as a tourist because you get a lot for your money.
Sure.
But you could just see that was a huge generalisation, but the women seem to stay at home. The men go out drinking, gambling and smoking, and you think, this is your life, isn't it? Probably was for a lot of...
Yeah.
It was quite a shock. But I stayed there for 3 nights before coming up into what's next, Serbia. I think Serbia was next, where it became more civilised.
In Macedonia, what was the terrain like? Was it mountainous?
All of the geography is fairly similar, all through Greece and Macedonia and Serbia. Pleasant, nice mountains, good roads.
Nice.
Macedonia, the roads were a bit potholed. In fact, I remember Rick Peewee saying to me when we were driving with him through the desert, long eye, short eye. So you keep your short eye on the potholes and your long eye on the idiots about to pull out in front of you. And that mantra has stuck with me. So thanks, Rick, if you're watching.
Yeah. Rick he's just a legend within the Jeep community.
Oh, yeah.
And I forgot about the fact that you did that long range desert route.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute, because that was I thought a very ambitious, and it was generally like a very well regarded expedition that you did.
A combination of saying yes and a lot of luck and a bit of down. The bad luck was we had to postpone it for a year because of the Arab Spring. So we had everything in place. We had the 2 Jeeps ready. We had some excellent guests, Rick being one of them, and Bob Atwater from the Explorers Club, Jason also from that, a Swedish author who'd just written a book on the long range desert. So he said, I can't believe we're going to go. Yes, let's go. And it was all in place.
Yeah.
And then they kicked out the Egyptian leader, I think. Yeah, so they booted him out and it all kicked off. And it was just too dangerous to go into Egypt.
Sure.
And Mahmoud, our Egyptian friend, said, look, you can't. We were ready to go. So I had to send an email saying, look, guys, this is the situation. Planning on postponing, and I hope you'll stick with us because we might be able to do it next year. Rick's comment was, can't we just fit machine guns? Probably not. But I thought, I like your style. So we did it the following year, and we shipped the Jeeps to Alexandria in a container, and it was a hassle getting them out. But it was always going to be a hassle because it's North Africa.
Of course.
And we got them out, and we completed 1,200 miles of pure desert in 2 1943 Jeeps. With backup, we had a truck, 2 Toyotas, an army, a Toyota with 4 guys from the military, tourist policemen. You have to have them. They wouldn't have been any use if anything had happened, but that's the rule. You have to pay. So it was always quite a big budget production, really, but we managed to pull it together, and we achieved it. And to this day, I think, oh God, that was incredible.
What was the history of the long-range desert route? Why is that significant? I mean, I know some of it, but
it was
for the reader to listen.
They were a big part of our victory in North Africa. So there was a guy called Ralph Bagnall who, between the wars, was stationed in Cairo. And these were clever guys. They were from universities in England. They had to do their national service, and they ended up in Cairo. So you've got half a dozen bright people who are adventurous holed up in Cairo. So they started to go out into the desert in their Model T Fords and map it. And then their trips got more and more ambitious to a point where Ford were giving them the new Model A. And they take all the bodywork off and put a flatbed on the back, load it up with jerry cans, and they'd do 1,000 miles into the desert, which nobody had ever done before. And being academic and clever, they mapped it and were accurate. And they used a radio to communicate with Cairo, with their friends back there, over distances you wouldn't even imagine. So when the war started and the Italians were very active in Libya and wanted to come into Egypt, Bagnall suggested to the head of command that he should perhaps form a little group to go and create havoc. And it was rejected twice. They said, don't be silly, you can't go out in the desert. He said, we can, we've done it. So in the end, they did. And to start with, they were just doing road watch. So they'd go to the middle of nowhere and watch the trucks come down that way on the track that wasn't linking Italian bases, and then count them going back and note that they were lighter. And then they'd radio that back to Cairo and say 20 trucks gone south, 20 trucks gone north, and log all the times.
Sure.
So they built up a picture of what the enemy were doing. It's a fantastic story. And then they got involved in some action and did a few raids, which were, they snuck in from nowhere. and then disappeared. So they were called the Ghost Patrol by mechanics. So where did they come from?
Yeah.
We're in the desert. And they come and blow everything up and clear off.
Yeah, amazing.
So we wanted to recreate some of those routes that they did. And we didn't find them because they were known already, but there's trucks still out there, upside down and blown up, that we visited. And you just think, we're here. We're looking at the very trucks.
And did the Long Range Desert Group actually use Jeeps at some point?
It was sort of. Their truck was the Chevy, a big two-wheel drive Chevy, which you think, well, why? But they were lighter.
Yeah, sure.
And they had big flotation tyres on. And their drivers were skillful.
Sure.
So they did. And a lot of us use two-wheel drive. You only need it if you get stuck for it.
Yeah.
But then the SAS sort of came out of the Long Range Desert. David Sterling, who was more of an action man. And that coincided with the launch of the Jeep, really. So the Jeep was far more manoeuvrable, quicker, lighter, and could be in and out much faster.
Sure.
So we weren't strictly true having Jeeps, but you can't get a Chevy, it's ridiculous. So the Jeep was perfect.
And I remember looking at the images, and it looked like they cut out quite a bit of the grille to increase the airflow. Is that right?
There's mixed theories, but a lot of people on the pictures commented, why did you cut the grille out? Do your history. That's what they did. And I can't see it made much difference to the cooling. But if you've taken in a load of sand in a sandstorm, and that front bit is full of sand, you want to be able to scoop it out. So that's one theory, because we did have a sandstorm, and
interesting.
It didn't fill, but you could suddenly see, we can scoop the sand out in front of the radiator.
You wanted to have access to it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We had a mesh actually over the radiator, so stone damage. You couldn't see it was painted black, but the mesh stopped stones going through. You learn these things, don't you, with experience.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Simple solutions.
Let's talk about, after the Long Range Desert Group, what were some of the other trips that you did into, anywhere in the world that you found you just really loved?
I think Libya will always be my favourite. I was working with some good guys, groups of archaeologists, and it was a project run by Professor David Mattingly at Leicester University, who I know, and he just said, do you fancy coming out? We could do with a photographer who knows a little bit about Land Rovers. So I pretended to be both, and I got away with it. They had some old Series 3 out there that broken down catastrophically the year before, 1997. The trouble is, when you say to an academic, what was wrong with it? They said, well, it broke. Yeah, but any more detail?
Any kind of detail.
Did it sound like, or did it boom, boom, or did it, did it go, wee? Anyway, we ascertained it. They had a couple of burnt out exhaust and a slipping clutch. A minibus went out with those bits on it, and I flew out with them, because it was when Tripoli Airport was closed to UK. We couldn't fly because of the embargo. We all met up, got there, took the thing apart. I was pretending to be a mechanic as well at that time, so we did get the engine out, put the new clutch on, took the cylinder head off, put the new valves in, and it worked. So I got away with it, and then we drove it down to the desert, and then the next year I thought, I'll bring mine. It's better. So I took my Caravane about 1999, and I combined that with, I came back the pretty way, so they came back via Tunisia and back. I went up to Tripoli and turned right, and went on to Cairo and to Jordan, Syria, Turkey, and back. So it was a big trip.
How did you go from Egypt into Jordan? You take the ferry?
I took the ferry from Aqaba.
And what did you think of Jordan?
Well, it's very English. They've got Marks and Spencers and stuff, because the king is English educated with an English wife. It was civilised. Syria, less so. And that was before there was any trouble.
Yeah, because I was looking at a route that would take me through Jordan and then into northern Iraq.
Yeah.
Northern Iraq is actually a better route than Syria now.
I'm sure it is, yeah. Has it opened up now? You can go to Iraq?
Yeah, northern Iraq. It's starting to open up, genuinely.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be amazing? You have written about Land Rovers for 50 years, and you've owned a few of them yourself. Yeah. What's your favorite?
Well, I've owned them for 50 years. I've written about them for 30 years. So that's a long time, isn't it? It only occurred to me this year. God, it's 50 years since I bought my first one.
And you don't still have that one, do you?
The 86-inch, no. I sold it and I bought a VW Beetle. It was cheap. And then a friend of mine bought a 1948 Land Rover, Steve Teague, who I was at college with. So in his last year at college, he bought this 48. I thought, I really fancy another Land Rover. I want an 8-inch. I kept an eye open. Sure enough, one cropped up. We had a magazine called Exchange and Mark, where everything was 1948 Land Rover. It was in London. I was in Salisbury at college. So I caught the train to London. It was £85, which was a lot in 1974. A lot of dosh. And I went into the bank and I wanted to draw out cash, knowing I had nothing in the bank account. So in those days, you had to write out a cheque, pay cash, £100, So pushed it over there. Said, how would you like the money, Mr. Savage? I said, 10. Said, okay. Gave it me. And I walked out. So I was £100 overdrawn like that. But I got the money. And I caught the train to London. Saw the Land Rover, bought it, and drove back. It was Easter. It was absolutely freezing. I did no heater. But I got it back away. It was fine. And then, so that was April 1970.
And then you had to work really hard to get the bank paid back.
Oh, yeah. I've always sort of put that to one side. But I've still got it. So that's the great thing. I still have that same Land Rover, and it's still in use.
And how many Land Rovers do you have total?
Well, I'm thinking I've got 4. I need one more.
And you have, like on Amazon, you can have a subscription to bring in, your vitamin C or whatever. You have oil comes in?
Yeah. You need a bit, yeah. Well, I have... The 2 I use is the 1948 one on a hot sunny day with the screen down. It's fantastic, and I'm 19 again. And then I have the Land Rover Wagon, which I've had for 25 years, the one I've done most of the trips in. So that's been to Libya, I think 7 or 8 times, been to Algeria with Chris Scott, been down through Tunisia and Egypt and all of Europe and Portugal and, all of Europe. So I've done a lot of, probably 100,000 miles of travel.
And if I remember that one, either it's permanently up or it
pops up.
It pops up, but it has 2 kind of half circles, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really wacky.
Very interesting.
They were boat builders, so they thought, we'll do this bespoke upmarket conversion. So the top is a sheet of aluminium that does that. There's some hinging wood. It's a very good design. Last year I had that all replaced. It cost a fortune, but the wood, you could crumple it in your hand. It's rotten.
Sure.
It's from 1970.
Sure.
But, in the last 20 years, it's had a TDI engine, Discovery transfer box, so it's fast. A big Alice bought intercooler, so it's more powerful. I mean, all this stuff's old now, but at the time, I wanted it to be the vehicle I needed to do expeditions.
Sure.
And it is. And it's it had a service earlier this year, so it's ready to go again this summer. Wherever I go, it's ready.
And a special thanks to Onyx Off-Road for helping to support this week's podcast. Going further on your adventures is about having the right tools. The Onyx Off-Road app's intuitive maps make it easy to find trails and disperse camping, and their offline maps give you full GPS navigation capability without cell coverage. I'm also really excited about their new route builder for planning and sharing custom trips. It's got a snap to trail tool where you can just drop points where you want to go and a route automatically connects to the closest road or trail. You can build, save, and add routes to folders and share your entire trip with your buddies. You can find out more information on onyxmaps.com. You can also find their apps in the Apple Store or whatever other device that you use. Thanks again, Onyx.
Plan these trips and you've had all of these experiences. When you look back on that, what were some of the things that you learned? Like as a traveler, what advice would you give to a new traveler?
To use the Nike term, just do it, because I've learned that you don't really need much. I mean, all you need is diesel and a washback, really, isn't it? You can go in any car. You can go on a bus. You can fly, bus, taxi, hike, bicycle. You don't have to have all the, I'm sorry to upset your advertisers, but you don't have to have all the gear.
Well, that's the advantage of what we do. We keep our advertisers completely separate from our editorial.
But it is good to have the gear. If you've got 2 weeks, if you've only got 2 weeks, you don't want to be faffing around getting stuck. And you want your beer cold out of the fridge. I can understand that. And a bit of me is the same in the caravan. I have the fridge, I have the winch, I have the solar panels, I have the gear. But the simplicity of the motorbike travel is you can't take all that. And then when I turned 60, you'll find this, these decades, you feel you have to do something to prove yourself to yourself. So I cycled from here to my friend in Italy, 1,000 miles on a bicycle. Well, then you can't take anything. And yet I did a lot of camping. So I had a lightweight tent, lightweight sleeping bag, some nights in hotels, other nights camping.
What did you think of traveling by bicycle? How was that?
You're accepted by everybody because you're not...
No intimidation.
No. And, oh, can you fill my bottle up with water? Yeah, of course I can. Yeah, and they're happy to help.
Yeah.
And if you're stopped at the side of the road, people stop and say, you okay? And say, yeah, I'm fine, thank you for stopping. But it's similar on a motorbike. If you stop on a bike,
very similar.
Other bikers stop straight away and say, are you all right? Which you don't get if you put this sort of great wall of aluminium and glass between you and the people.
That's very true. Yeah. And if you go even beyond that, up to the big expedition vehicles like the Unicats and the Unimogs and everything else, then you're like another planet.
Yeah. And
people just have a hard time relating to who you are. Very, very intimidating.
Yeah. And in some of the places that we've all travelled, poor places, you're projecting an image of wealth.
Yeah.
And, your accessory probably costs his annual salary.
That's right.
So you're going to be the target for theft, really. But hopefully not, because most people are very honest.
Yep.
But you just think, well, hang on, you're sort of putting sweeties in front of the children here, whereas my old caravan, it doesn't look as though it's worth anything.
Yeah.
It's got dents and scratches.
Sure.
There's three sides to it. One, I quite like it looking like that. Two, I can't afford to do anything about it anyway. And three, it doesn't look as though I've got any money, which is pretty accurate. But
it allows you to travel freely. You're not, and if something happened to the vehicle, you'd be sad, of course, but it wouldn't be like losing a £500,000 expedition vehicle. Yeah.
No. Yeah. And here, as in the States, people like to buy all that stuff.
Yeah.
We go to shows and we see something on display and think, you're kidding, how much? And then by the end of the weekend, it's gone. It keeps the whole industry going, so that's fine.
Well, and I think people making the modifications that they find that they really need in order to do their trip. And some things you need, like if you go into the high latitudes or if you want to cross glaciers or whatever, you have to have a certain piece of kit. If you go into the desert, you might benefit from some traction boards and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's highly specialized, but for the most part, you just really don't need much. You just don't.
When you see there's a range of sand dunes in Libya, which are a bit of a tourist place. You go around 3 oases. It's beautiful. But the first bit is a climb up through some soft sand dunes. It's big. And you're in a little tea place out at the bottom, watching people mess it up. And all the locals are there. All the Tuareg drivers with their tatty old Toyotas on bull tyres, they just go straight up.
They have no problem.
And I have to say, I did it. But then you get to the top and find there's a Peugeot 504 pickup is up there as well.
Sure.
On whatever tyres it happened to have.
Yep.
And you think, well, how did he get up? Well, he's local. He knows.
Power of local knowledge.
Yeah.
They can read every grain of sand.
Everything with huge skill. So I'm more for less than more now.
And now that you look back on all of these amazing journeys, Toby, how did it change you as a person? How are you different today?
I think I'm far more accepting of other cultures. I think if you don't travel and you stay in your own city or country, you have this fear of all foreigners, which is totally unfounded. I think travel reinforces that. It's a big generalisation. I've been in Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Ethiopia, Guatemala. A lot of lovely places, and I've met nothing other than friendship and a smiling face. You smile at them, they smile at you.
For sure.
It's as simple as that. If you go in thinking he's going to rob me, stab me, then you have your defences up.
Yep.
Whereas if you go in with a smile and act stupid, they usually help you.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any occasion when I've felt uncomfortable. Crossing Serbia during a ceasefire in 1994, would it be?
Oh, sure.
That was a bit hairy because I got to the border and they've all got Kalashnikovs, I had the right documentation, but I showed them. They said, "What's that?" I said, "It's a map." I said, "Oh, I'm going there," and they obviously wanted to keep the map. I was like, "I need it," And they had my passport, and I said, "Look, can I have the map back?" And they got the map back. And he was sort of sweaty and unshaven military guy. Well, this is a bit serious. I said, "I need my passport, please."
Yeah.
So I smiled and was very polite. Never lose your temper, because otherwise you're there forever. And he did give me a passport, and I was very relieved to get over that bit of no man's land into Greece. It wasn't the people. The people were fine. It was the official, the military official, who was a bit iffy, but nothing happened. It was all right.
So that's an interesting point in time. So when you were on that side of the Adriatic,
Yeah.
I was on the other side of the Adriatic because I was in the U.S. Air Force, and I was stationed in San Vito in southern Italy during the whole Slobodan Milosevic, the whole Bosnian.
Nice posting. Yeah, Italy.
It was a nice posting. So we were both on, and I was there in 1994. So it would have been
it was about the same time, yeah. There had been a ceasefire, and it was just that window of opportunity to get across. I borrowed again. Land Rover lent me a P38 diesel. Yeah, wow.
Fantastic. One of the things that I love to ask in the podcast is your favorite books. Are there any books that you've read, even if they're totally quirky, out in the middle of nowhere?
It was Ralph Bagnall's trips through Libya that he wrote in, I think he must have written it just after the war, Travels in a Dead World or something, where he was describing their trips across to Sinai and down into the Sand Sea.
Oh, wow.
And I was reading that whilst traversing that terrain in 1999.
Incredible.
And he'd be writing about somewhere. I think, I'm there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that work by Bagnall was really good.
That sounds like a great one.
Yeah. In fact, I've just remembered, you remind me actually, I've lent it to Ben Stowe, who does Land Rover work up in Yorkshire. He's got it. And it's not even mine, it belongs to Ruth Pelling, an archaeologist. So if you see this, Ruth, I'll get it back. Yeah. So that was definitely a great book to read whilst there.
Yeah, for sure. So what's next for you? What's next on your plan?
I'm thinking of a bit of a change of direction because the old age thing, you can't avoid it. I'm not the Land Rover, the Carawagon is fantastic, but everything's a bit heavier. Changing a wheel is heavy. Putting the roof up with its solar panels on is heavy. It's easy to drive, but I'm thinking if I reach the end of my time with this big, heavy Land Rover. At the moment, it's just a plan that might happen this year, but I think I'll sell the bike anyway, which was the plan anyway, sell the Caravan and then sell the Audi that's out here and buy a VW camper.
Oh, nice.
You can get a 4x4 one, synchro,
right,
with a good camper conversion. And it'll be a lot of money, but it'd be just so easy.
Yeah, you'll be set.
And I'll still be able to do trips, but at 40 miles to the gallon and 70 miles an hour. And it'll be lighter. Everything will be lighter. So it's sort of giving into old age a bit, but I see it as a new chapter, really. And, when you buy something new, you're a bit more keen to do things, aren't you? You buy a new camera, suddenly you take 5,000 pictures. you buy a new car, you drive, or you buy a new motorbike, you're out on it. So I need that stimulus. So I'll keep the 48 Land Rover because that's part of my life, but the Caravan, which I've had for 25 years, I think its days are done, really, because... this summer...
someone else can use it.
Someone else, it needs to be on a trip. It's ready to go. Then I'll move that money into the Volkswagen. Sounds a bit boring and a bit sort of granddaddish, but, I'm not 40 anymore, I'm nearly 70. And whilst I'm in pretty good nick, can I still be seeing myself doing it when I'm 80?
Yeah.
And the last 10 years have gone by like that.
I know.
Yeah, so...
Unbelievable how fast it goes.
Yeah, changes have to be made. And I think it's better to be ahead of the game rather than behind.
Plan for it.
I saw an interview with Michael Caine, an old one, where it was Billy Connolly, and they were talking about drinking wine. And Billy Connolly was at the time, this is probably 20 years ago, he was quite a big drinker. And Michael Parkinson said to Michael Caine, well, how are you on drink? He said, well, I've cut right down. I have a couple of glasses a night. He said, because I don't want to get to the stage where the doctor says, you've got to stop drinking. So I'm a bit like that. I don't want the doctor to say you've got to stop doing these trips, which I'd still do anyway. But if I make the trips easier on me, then I can carry on doing stuff.
I think that's a great lesson, and it's also the nature of life. We change, and
sadly,
our needs change. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you're still thinking it, but the body is less able to do these things.
Yeah, sure.
Having said that, we're off cycling around the vineyards of Burgundy next week.
That's how you're staying in good nick.
Well, yeah,
because you're doing that.
I get an adequate amount of exercise. You can always get more, but
that's great.
I still do a bit.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Now, how do people find out more about your adventures? Well, any books that you've been featured in, or your social?
I'm a regular contributor to Classic Land Rover magazine, which is sort of grumpy old blokes writing about rusty old Land Rovers, basically. But we have a good time, and we're all mates, and the magazine sells pretty well. But I've also started building up a YouTube channel of films I've made over the last 30 years, edited down to a very precise 5 minutes, so nothing too long. And it's called I Should Be Back on the 10th, which is a sort of random date that I used to give to wives and partners, meaning I might be back. yes.
You may or may not be there when you get back. Huh?
Funnily enough, they've all been pretty understanding, really. But the YouTube channel is sort of growing very slowly. I don't push it much, but it's good fun doing it.
So the name of the YouTube channel is I'll Be Back on the 10th.
I should be back on the 10th.
I should be back on the 10th.
Yeah, so if you put that into YouTube,
yeah, perfect.
It should come up with a few.
Toby, it's been such a pleasure to spend time with you. It was great to go to the pub and catch up. Your travels have been a great inspiration to me and so many others. The work that you've put into Overland Journal, it's all incredible stories. And, people can buy the back issues with your long range.
LRDG, yeah.
Yeah, the long range desert.
Yeah.
And other stories that you've done for us as well.
Yeah, I did the Libyan stuff.
That's right. Yeah. And that was just fantastic.
Well, I, as I said earlier, I took a picture there out in the desert. And I knew you'd use it because it was a sort of picture no one else would use. It had the carcass of a lamb hanging in the foreground that had just been slaughtered. So we were like, 3 days out.
Sure. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's been a great pleasure, Scott. And you've brought out the memories that I've had in there. So thank you very much.
No, thank you, Toby. And we thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.